When the scale stops moving, every coach says the same thing. If you're not losing fat, you're not in a deficit. Basically, you're lying. To who? I'm not entirely sure. Yourself, I guess. But for most people, the first half of that sentence is kind of true. Pretty much no one plateaus while genuinely eating less than they burn. But that doesn't mean that you're lying. No one consciously underreports their own diet on purpose. They just can't see the mistake yet. And that's the whole point of this video. I'm going to show you what I check in order, the same process that I run with every client who hits this same wall. I will be honest though, clients do lie to me sometimes, hiding a few extra snacks, downplaying the all you can eat. Everyone's done it at some point. I've done it myself, sneaking in an Oreo and not tracking it, but it's rare and that alone wouldn't stop you losing fat. If the scale's been stuck for weeks on end, it's not because someone's been lying to themselves without fail every single day. It's because there's a mistake somewhere and you can't spot it, because if you could, you'd have fixed it already and the scales would be moving again. So when I have a client whose macros I've set to be in a guaranteed deficit and weight still isn't moving, there's a few things that I look at. Before we look at food, we check that steps are being hit consistently, because drops here and there will add up, and it's the same thing with training. I don't focus much on cardio because the deficit should always work without that. But if that's as it should be, then we move on to food and we start with some pictures. So what I'd expect to see across the day is a few different sources of fruit and vegetables. So maybe some leafy greens, some colourful things, some peppers, some fruit in there. Now this is not going to be a magic pill to make the diet start working again, but we know that low fibre leads to worse diet control, so there's going to be more chances of snacking. If we can get that in there, it's just going to make the diet a bit easier to stick to, and we're going to make sure there's no vitamin and mineral deficiencies. I'm looking at, is 90% of the food single ingredient? Because it's going to add to the volume, it's going to keep them feeling fuller. It's also going to be easier to track and easier to digest. If someone's eating a McDonald's breakfast, a microwave meal, and 3 protein puddings, it's a recipe for disaster. Is every meal centered around a protein source? Because splitting it across the day is going to help with fullness, so again, sticking to the diet. And we're also going to trigger MPS, so muscle protein synthesis, more often, which is the growth of muscle tissue, and we all want that. If we look across the week, is intake consistent day to day? Not tight through the week and then completely different on a weekend, because you're going to have different tracking, you're going to have more margin for error. We want consistent as much as we can across all 7 days. Now, if there's things on a weekend, we might have to work around that, but for the majority, it wants to look pretty similar. And the one that trips people up the most, are there any liquid calories? Whether that be sauces, dips, sugar in tea. There's stuff added on top of a meal that never gets logged because it doesn't feel like real food. Little squirt of ketchup, I'm not counting that. But again, over a day, that starts to add up. Are there any meals out and is there a photo of it anywhere? Because when you track it 2 days later and that chicken kebab becomes chicken and rice, 400 calories in MyFitnessPal, you look back at a photo of that and you can clearly see that that is going to be more because you had the pita bread with it, you had some entrees. Because with the use of AI, you can get pretty accurate macros from a photo of your food, rather than just entering it as a generic chicken and rice on MyFitnessPal and selling yourself short. And if any of these are off, it's the first thing that gets fixed, because there's no point going any further until this list is in order. Most of the time, sorting that list alone is enough to get things moving again on its own. We don't need to go any further. But if that is all in order and we're still not seeing the scales move, then we start to look at the actual tracking. A lot of my clients will use MyFitnessPal, but you can use NutriCheck, you can use Chronometer, there's loads of apps out there. The first thing I'm going to be looking at is, are we tracking macros, not calories? Because some entries count fiber as a carb and others don't. So you can zero your macros and apparently still be 120 calories under your target. Stick with the macros, ignore the calories. What you've got to remember is MyFitnessPal is like Wikipedia. Anyone can put an entry on, and there will be people on there putting entries in just to suit their needs. So that 150 calorie cheeseburger that someone had is probably not accurate. I'm also going to be checking, are the entries tracked as raw weight or cooked weight, and is that correct? Because you've also got to remember that there's a lot more ambiguity in the cooked weight. So if you take a chicken breast, the longer you cook it, the lighter it's going to get because more and more water is coming out, but the calories aren't in the water, the calories are in the chicken breast, so it's not getting any less calories. Raw weight is a far more accurate way of tracking your food, so if you're not already doing that, it's a great place to start. Now, between looking at the pictures of the food and the tracking, most errors have been identified. But if the scale's still not moving after both of these are sorted, there is a second stage. If we've exhausted all of these options and weight's still not moving after another week or two of improved food, improved tracking, then it might be time to try a set meal plan for a fortnight just to see if weight moves. Because this is going to remove a lot of the variables. It's going to take out a lot of margin for error, and it's going to mean that everything is ultra consistent for a short period of time to see if actually the deficit is working. The way that I create a diet like this is I'll work with the client. I'll find out how many times per day they normally eat. We'll go over the options that they like. We'll put all the things in that I said earlier, the fruit, the veg, single ingredient food, all raw weights, so there is no ambiguity within the plan. And I'll give them 2 alternative days so they can choose which day they fancy. So it's not too boring. But remember, this is only for a short period of time, and it is an extreme option just to see if weight does move once all the variables have been taken out. And this is typically the part where I'll find out if a client is snacking and not mentioning it, and I'll give them the opportunity to tell me about it so we can try and build it in and work around it. Or we start the meal plan and weight starts to come down, and then we know it's an issue with tracking. So after we've done a couple of weeks of this and they've got into the habit of eating the good foods, tracking it properly, we might look at optimizing diet a little bit more. So maybe they're only eating 2 times a day normally. We'll start to bring that up to 3 to 4 so they get into the routine while they've got the set diet plan and they're being told exactly what to do to make it as simple as possible. And then over time, we'll start to reintroduce tracking. So as an example, we might go up to 4 meals per day. And then after a week, I will give them back tea time meals so they can choose what they want within that. But again, we go through the steps of sending me pictures of the food, sending me the tracking so that I can see that that does actually fit within the plan that we've got. And we make sure that weight continues to come down. And if that stops, then we revisit these steps because something has changed. And it's a lot easier to identify what has changed when there's only a single meal that's moving every day. You've got to remember though, this is an extreme example. Most people will not make it to needing a set diet plan. And if they do, it's as a way of fixing a problem. It's a lot of effort. It's going to be worth it in the long run because it might take 4, 6, 8 weeks. But beyond that, they can then go back to fully tracking their own food and having that freedom and be getting the results now that they weren't getting before. But like I said, some people will still hide things. They will snack and they will not tell me, and they will try to dismiss it from the mind and pretend that it's not happened and it's only a little thing and it won't stop any progress. It won't stop weight from coming down. Unfortunately, it will, but even knowing that, some people still won't tell me because I think there is a big element of shame with not being able to stick to the plan, not wanting it bad enough, not trying hard enough, or whatever thought process they attach to that. So typically I'll jump on calls with a client, try and work out, is there anything that you want to put into this diet? Like if you could put anything into it at all once a day, what would you put in? Your death row meal, you could have anything, what would it be? And if they say, just M&Ms, we'll build some M&Ms in, we'll make the plan more realistic. And it may mean slowing down the deficit, but that's a completely valid option because the slow deficit is better than no deficit at all. It's about finding what works for the person, problem solving, troubleshooting, and getting a plan that ultimately they can stick to over time. But again, even beyond that, some people will lie. I once had a client who worked with me for 6 months. And on paper, his results were perfect. His weight was coming down, there were fluctuations, his macros were just slightly out from targets, but close enough that it wasn't a problem and weight was still moving. But every week I'd look at his pictures and I'd be thinking, these are not looking any different. Like this guy must have been holding it really well. And then we finished after 6 months and I said, I'm really happy with the results, but I can't believe how little your pictures show it. And he actually came clean and said, I'll be honest, for the last 6 months, I have made up every bit of data. I've not eaten any of the food. I've been eating as normal, having pizza. I'm actually a kilo up. I can't understand it. I couldn't understand it at the time. It's been a couple of years now and I still can't understand it. Unfortunately, for people like that, there is no helping. Like there is limits to this. But as long as you're not someone who's completely fudging the numbers on purpose, this shows the benefits of having someone in your corner. Someone like me, someone impartial to look at the data and figure out why it's not moving as it should. Is the plan broken, or do you just need something that fits to you a bit better? After watching, this probably sounds like a really big list, but in truth, you're probably only making 1 or 2 of these errors and they're adding up. So write it down and go through it, do it as a checklist, and everything should start moving again. Weight should start coming down without having to introduce extra cardio or more steps, just correcting the tracking and the mistakes that you didn't know that you were making. And if you want to know where your macros should be as a starting point, I've linked my deficit calculator below. You can put in your details and it will tell you roughly where you want to be in a deficit, and you can even select how hard you want to go. Remember, be realistic. And as always, if you found this useful, make sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss more like it.